Welcome to Reel, where we look at how relationships are portrayed in film so we can see more clearly what works and doesn't work in our real-life relationships. Today's film is The Last Station, starring Helen Mirren, who was nominated for Best Actress, and Christopher Plummer, who was nominated for Best Actor.
Okay, Fleur, let's talk about The Last Station. Very interesting movie. I really liked that movie.
Yes.
And from a relationship point of view, there's an enormous amount in there about Leon Tolstoy and his wife in particular.
Yeah.
So what's your initial take on that movie from a relationship point of view?
It's very complex, and I'd say that was one of the best parts about it. There's so many movies, and we've all seen them, where it's not complex at all. And it's too bad, because then, first of all, we're not learning anything about relationship when we watch one like that. And second of all, we're getting the impression that relationships are simple, and they're not. They're very complicated and complex, and they're moving. They're always moving. It's not like they're static and staying in one place. They're moving. And we sort of have to keep up with them a little bit. So, actually, that is what happens in that movie, that they have not kept up with what has happened. So we know enough from what they talk about that they used to be living in the country, having children, he was doing his writing, and they were very close. She rewrote most of his manuscripts, we know that. But by the end of their life, something else is going on, and that is that he's become famous, and she keeps wanting to say to him, keep your feet on the ground, keep your feet on the ground. Don't let yourself get thrown into this image. She's even saying that. And he, because he has an ego, keeps sort of feeling, well, how come everybody else thinks I'm special and you don't? She's saying, well, because I've lived with you for 40 years, that's why. You're wonderful. You're wonderful, but you're not special.
So he's become a world icon.
Yes.
And I think he's the #1 selling author ever.
Yeah.
But back then, which is around 1910, 1912, somewhere in there, he's at the end of his life, and he must be in his 70s, late 70s. And he wants to give away his work, if you remember.
Yeah.
And she is really concerned, because they've had 13 children, or 12 children, and she's concerned that the money go to the family. And I think that's what he meant by much more grounded.
Well, that's not all what I mean. No, not at all. I mean, he's surrounded by sycophants.
Yeah.
He is surrounded by that. And she's the only one that says, yoo-hoo, you're normal. And he doesn't really like that all that much.
Here's a clip from the film to illustrate what has happened between this longtime couple.
I believe that wealth corrupts us all. Yes, I do.
It's a keystone of the movement.
Oh, God, I know all about the movement.
If the peasants had money, they wouldn't surround themselves as we do, with footmen costing 10 rubles a month.
No, they'd spend it on drink and whores.
Ah. Valentin Fedorovich. What do you think?
Tea.
You think that 50 years from now people will eat while grown men walk around waiting on hand and foot?
I think that's good. Bless you.
Stop scribbling. You all think he's Christ, don't you?
What?
He thinks he's Christ.
I'm not... I don't believe Lev Nikolaevich is Christ. Christ is Christ, but...
But what?
I do believe he's one of the prophets. God speaks through him. I recognize the cadence in his voice.
Oh, God, this is unbearable. No wonder I feel lonely. I'm surrounded by morons.
Oh, you're being ridiculous.
Oh, am I? I have to sit here and listen to this talk of love and God and equality, knowing all the time, full well, that Count Generosity here is about to give away everything we own.
Now, why do you keep going on about this? Why do you think that we should profit from the work I'm doing now, which is only meant for the sake of the people?
Stop writing!
What has happened, again, I can't know for sure, but as a psychologist looking at that, I'm looking at it and I'm saying, she is getting more and more hysterical. And what the movie does is it keeps looking at her from the standpoint of the people who love him and saying, look at this crazy woman, she's getting more and more hysterical. Well, I'm looking at it and I'm saying, what is really causing this hysteria is that he is discounting her more and more. And so I know we've all had experiences where we say to somebody, I'm feeling so angry. And the other person says, there is nothing to be angry about, which makes you kind of crazy. You do one of two things with that. You either pretend you're not angry, or it revs it up, makes it even more so. So that's what we see with her, that she's getting more and more revved. Now it's technically about the will, but it's not really about that. It's about he is not responding to her, and he's moving away. He's probably getting married to his fame, and there's nothing she can do, or she doesn't think there's anything she can do to bring him back. And so she gets more and more dramatic, theatrical, trying to somehow make an impact. What is awful about that film, not about the film, but about what we're seeing, is here is a woman who is, because of the time in which she lived, in part, getting completely disempowered. And there's nothing she can do about it. I mean, she helped him get to where he is, and then when he got there, he sort of got stuck on himself and abandoned her. And I'll bet you I could find in about a half a minute 500 people living here who have exactly the same situation. And it can certainly happen both ways.
Right. So what happens, it seems to me, in that film is they've really loved each other. And they've got all these kids, and they wrote the books, and she helped him, and all of that. She was a big part of it. And then they started to drift. And for whatever reason, they either didn't have the skills or the interests or the tools or whatever to keep in touch with each other as they got older and drifted, until they drifted too far apart.
Which I think is a very old story. I think it happens a lot.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's happened in my relationship with Harvey is one or both of us are able, because we're fairly skilled, to say, I'm not feeling close enough to you. And where are you, or where are we, or something like that. Occasionally the other person will say, I don't know what you're talking about. Didn't we just go to the movies yesterday? That's not what, you're not talking about that. You're talking about there's an emotional depth that's having some slippage. And you have to pay attention to that.
Right. And that's what, in an intimate relationship, I assume a companion relationship, it's constantly you're getting closer, you're getting further away, closer, as people change and circumstances change.
Right.
And the importance of keeping that connection, which in the film they don't do.
Right. You can have a lot of change. You can have a lot of change within the individuals and within how the marriage is structured, as long as you have connection. But if you lose connection, then you have no way of maintaining however those changes are.
Right. And so you wind up like the Tolstoy and his wife in that film,
Right.
who've loved each other for so long and are yet so unhappy with each other.